It's great to actually meet you. I see you have a very impressive whiteboard behind you.
Yes, I actually happen to be doing this at work right now. So I'm not at work. I just happen to be here because I'm a high school teacher and my daughter is playing a middle school volleyball game. So this is where I am.
That's fabulous. And what do you teach? I see refute doctrine. What is this class?
This is history, and we've been discussing Plato's dialogue of Gorgias.
Fabulous. That is amazing. Well, thank you for meeting with me at work on a Saturday. I really appreciate that.
Well, if I hadn't been here, I'd have been at home. So it's no trouble at all.
Well, I like your background. It's just I feel very scholarly already.
Oh,
So
good, good. Yes, let us by all means be scholarly.
just tell us a little bit about who you are and like what your background is.
Okay, well, let's see. My name's I go by Scott Huggins. I write under G. Scott Huggins, which was supposed to sound really literary, like F. Scott Fitzgerald, but all it really does is get people endlessly asking me what the G stands for. I really should have just gone with George Scott Huggins, like Orson Scott Card, and that would probably have been a lot easier. But in any case, it's too late now. Um, so let's see, what else? I grew up in Wichita, Kansas, and I decided and I became eventually a teacher of history. So I've been teaching world history and United States history, and right now I'm focusing on world history with a fun military history elective at my current school. As far as writing, I started out reading people like Larry Niven and Alan Dean Foster and Anne McCaffrey, and uh, and then I kind of realized that maybe if I wanted to, I could write my own stories that would make people go, "Wow, this is so cool," and that's really been my journey as a writer. And I took me a while to get up to novel length, but my first novel came out in 2019, and now let's see, Through a Spyglass Darkly will be my, let's see, two, three, four. Let's see, I guess that's my eighth novel published.
That's fabulous. And so I see you've got your Canon shirt on. How are you
Yep.
involved with Canon?
Well, Canon is Canon is has published the first two books of an epic military fantasy series called the Wishkiller Saga, and so the first one came out early in the year, and that was A Cold and Mortal Spring, and the second one just came out in August, and that is called. The War of the Shattered Moon, and so this is it's guns and sorcery, or as my editor likes to call it, flintlock fantasy epic, where in which our hero must save the world from a creeping doom that has been unleashed by an out of control wishing well that grants one person any wish. Of course, if you screw up the wish, well, we've heard of what happens when you screw up the wish. So that's the story on that, and I'm working on book three of that series right now, and I'm hoping to get that finished up by the end of the year.
You sound a lot like Sam Robb, who's
Oh,
doing dual novels with us and Canon right now. I think he did was it Blue Sky? I think with Canon, and we just finished
sigils, right?
Sigils.
No,
Yes.
yes, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, Sam's been a colleague, and before that, a fan. So
Yeah.
I'm really happy to. In fact, it was funny. 3 years ago, I just got memories today. Where 3 years ago he said, "Well, whatever you put out next, I'm gonna pick it up," and I was like, "Wow!" And now you're my like one of my structural editors for this for Through a Spyglass Darkly. So that's gonna be wonderful.
And so how did you get involved with Raconteur?
Well, I mean, I've known Raconteur for a while, and I think it was 2 years ago at LibertyCon, Ian and I just sort of were spitballing about maybe a novel someday, because Raconteur at that point hadn't published any novels. They were just doing really, really well with their anthos, and that was a lot of fun. And so he said, I want to we want to talk about that at some point. And then this year at LibertyCon, I mentioned to him, I said, I've got a novel you might be interested in looking at, and he said, okay, that's cool. I didn't exactly expect him to a month later say, hey, send me that novel you were talking about. So I sent it to him, and very quickly he said, yes, we love it, we want it. Uh, let's get this started. So I'm very happy about that.
I love that you're a history teacher because I know that you've got to be drawing on that expertise when you write. What are some ways that you do that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that has always really interested me about medieval European history is how many times, how many things could have gone another way so easily. So, for example, in this novel, one of the side elements, which I hope there's going to be more books where I can kind of mess around with this too. But one of the side elements is that uh, the Norman conquest never happened. Uh, so, so what happened was that William of Normandy did launch his attempted conquest of England, and Harold II kicked his butt, and he died. So it is William, not Harold, who dies on the field of Hastings. And I mean, what's really interesting is that according to the actual known history of the Battle of Hastings, was that on William's first charge at Harold's position, he fell off his horse. And there was a moment there where everyone thought he could be dead, but he got up and he rallied his troops. And as we all know, he eventually won. But if William's fall had been a little worse, or if he had just gotten knocked out, and people thought he was dead, then the Normans would have fled the field, the Saxons would have taken it, and there would have been no coming back from that. William would have been, even alive, William would have been cut off and in disorder. Saxon reinforcements were coming up. The invasion would have failed. Um, Now, a lot of people have figured this out. What more people do not know is that at the same time this was all happening, there was a king of Brittany, which at that time was not a province of France, it was a separate kingdom, a king named, of all things, Conan. And King Conan was taking advantage of William's absence to attempt an invasion of Normandy. And the really weird part of this story is that supposedly, and this is more legend than history, but supposedly the first castle King Conan captured, he found a set of gloves, put them on, and then died because the gloves had been poisoned as a trap. And so the only part of that we know is true is that Conan died, and when William came back, he then went on to conquer Brittany as well as England. That was the end of the kings of Brittany. But had Brittany remained a strong independent kingdom, and had Normandy not succeeded in this, the question is there really a France at all? Or are there just little tiny semi-independent lordships that speak various dialects of French? And does France become more like what we know the Holy Roman Empire became? This sprawling region where, yeah, everyone speaks German, and supposedly there's an emperor, but nobody really pays that much attention to the emperor. Everybody's just trying to fight for their own independence as hard against the emperor as possible. So in my world, France is not really a solid kingdom. France is lots of little tiny independent city states and counties and baronies, and the King of France is nominal at best. And the action really, I mean, the action of the novel is in the Kingdom of Brittany, which is an independent kingdom. And it's the Holy Roman Empire that is a strong central power and trying to take out bits of France instead of in the real world where it was France trying to take out little bits of Germany and enrich itself.
So I'm really curious about something.
Okay.
How has in your study of history, what are those moments when you've gone, this is a story? And how have you taken an event and explored it as a character oriented, structured story? How have you done
So
that?
you just wanted me to give you an example of a story I've done that way?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, hold it. Here, I'm gonna pop off the screen and show you one.
Okay. That makes it more lively.
So this is Chicks in Tank Tops, and it was published by Baen a couple of years ago. In fact, I think I was talking about this at the same LibertyCon where I was talking to Ian the first time. And so, so here's another one. Uh, we all know who, I mean, everybody knows Machiavelli, Niccolo Machiavelli, and he wrote the Prince. The reason he wrote The Prince was because he was trying to get back in favor of some Italian lord, Cesare Borgia specifically. And the reason he needed to get back in favor of an Italian lord was because he had been one of the chief movers behind the Republic of Florence. He had tried, he's one of the people who had made the Republic of Florence a thing and was trying not to get back under the rule of a lord. So unfortunately, the Republic of Florence fell. Machiavelli's government did not succeed. Machiavelli was not in charge of it. He was the foreign minister. He was their chief diplomat. And but the reason that this failed is really interesting because the Republic of Florence was nominally an ally of the French. And the French and the Spanish were basically fighting over who's going to have the most influence in Italy because Italy is home to the Pope. And we got to have, so who's going to be the Catholic power that has most of their thumb on the Pope? And the Spanish and the French met in a battle called the Battle of Ravenna, which turned out to be a French victory. That was a really stunning turn of events because the Spanish had been pretty much undefeatable for the past at least 100 years. Now, the problem was that even though the French won, their major commander, a guy named Foy, he made a last charge in the field to mop up some of the fleeing Spanish, and one of them put a bullet through him, and he died. And of the two commanders, he was the one who was really on the offensive, 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 attack, attack, attack. So in this story, that doesn't happen. He wins the Battle of Ravenna and survives. Machiavelli's government will succeed. And the part of the reason that this happens is that the heroine of my story is an apprentice of Leonardo da Vinci, and she is the driving force behind getting Leonardo to actually perfect a steam engine powered tank with a steam engine powered gun. The tank and the gun are real sketches of Leonardo da Vinci that I have found. Leonardo da Vinci went, of course, more into art than engineering, but I have a disaster for Leonardo da Vinci that forces him to go into engineering and weapon design. And so she and he lead a small platoon of tanks that turns the battle in favor of Florence while the French are winning the Battle of Ravenna. And there we have it.
I love it.
Thank you. That was a story that was fun as hell to write.
Yeah, and so you mentioned earlier, I have to take notes. You mentioned Larry
Absolutely.
Niven, Alan Alan Dean Foster, and Anne McCaffrey. And so what kind of a reader are you? How do you interact with the book and what do you want from books when you read a story?
Oh yeah, I've been pondering that question since you sent it to me, and the problem is that it so much depends on like what kind of book it is in the first place. I mean, there are some books. I mean, some of Alan Dean Foster's books and Anne McCaffrey's are, in a sense, I mean, they're mind candy. You read them through and you're like, wow, that was really cool. Um, and I mean, I'm especially thinking of Alan Dean Foster's first Flinks adventures. I mean, that was it. But some of the books I really love, and these are in a sense the books I kind of try to write, uh, are the books where there's a lot of background and you can tell something happened a long time ago that's very important, and as the book goes forward you start to get hints of these things. What was it that happened so long ago that was very important? So a series that I did for Chris Kennedy, and I just happen to have book two here, Responsibility of the Throne. And this is actually my favorite book in the series. But in the stories of my protagonist here, very influenced, I will have to say, by Anne McCaffrey, Responsibility, the Half Dragon Princess. She is born into this world, and she, for most of her life she grows up away from her kingdom. So the kingdom that she was born into is in some sense as much a mystery to her as it is to us. But as you go further and further through the series, you start to realize that this is a very, very different world from Earth, and it's a very strange world that is going to require some explanation. So that was a fun series to write.
And so would you say you are more character oriented or more plot oriented as a writer?
I don't think I can answer that question. I mean, the plot drives the action, and in many ways, the plot is going to reveal the characters for who they really are. Um, I, I, I've got to admit, I hate the phrase character-driven fiction, not because I don't really like not because I don't really like the idea of character driven fiction, but so many people have used character driven fiction to as a code for we don't want an actual story. Or this is my excuse for why I didn't write an actual story, but a couple of characters wandering around, navel gazing and philosophizing for hundreds of pages. So if you mean that, I'm definitely a plot driven, story driven characters, but I don't think you have, without the plot, what are the characters doing? Without the characters, well, then, I mean, then you get things like, honestly, Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, where the characters are talking heads, uh, you know, bloviating about the plot. And I think both extremes are bad for story.
Definitely. Yeah, I like how you have the characters are sort of anchored to this sort of past event
Hmm.
that you sort of reveal in the present. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Good, I'm glad. Yeah. The
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of what I'm doing with Spyglass Darkly is we talk about alternate history, and it certainly is. But frankly, I think I prefer alternate reality in this case, and that's because humans are not the only intelligent species on Earth, but they are still the dominant species on Earth, and that's tied a lot into how magic and creatures work on this alternate Earth. And frankly, one of the best series I can compare it to, and I think it really has been an inspiration for this series, was DJ Butler's Witchy Eye series, where I mean, in his series, there are humans, but there are also elves. Or the first, I think, oh, what does he call it? Like the firstborn, and there's Matt, but the interaction between mainline humans and these elves is who more or less, the elves look like humans, but they are different. And in some ways, that's what's going on in my series. I mean, in another inspiration, I think, was Lois McMaster Bujold's one-off novel, The Spirit Ring. So for example, in The Spirit Ring, humans definitely dominate, but there are also kobolds or gnomes, and they interact with humans not very much directly, but there's certainly some influence that both people have over each other.
And so what made you want to start through a Spyglass Darkly? I'm assuming this is a series, right?
Yeah, well, it started out with a very simple question. What happens if you give Medusa or a Gorgon? What happens if you give a Gorgon a spyglass? You meet Medusa's gaze, or she looks at you, you look at her, you turn to stone. What happens when you add a power of a telescope to that? Ooh, it's very powerful. So I gave her a spyglass, and we the power of petrifying people even from a long way away. I mean, that is very powerful, but there are some definite disadvantages to it. So there you have it.
And what kind of world building did you do for this story?
Well, I mean, I had to ask myself first, what the political situation really was going to be like. I mean, if I was going to write this story, where was it set? And why it was is very clear that there's going to be this, this is set in the middle of the war. Okay, so who's at war with who and why? Um, who are what's and then I had to start thinking of what's the long-term situation, where does all this fit together? And then I realized fairly quickly, because it started off as a short story. The very first beginning was as a short story, and the only non-human character in it was my main character, Jahan Dark. But as I had to put her through more of a world, I had to say, okay, if there are Gorgons in this world, what else is in there? What other legendary creatures are? And the answer is almost all of them. Just about everything we've got a legend for exists on some level or another. So yeah, there are fairies, there are elves, there are dwarves, um, and they all, in some senses, they sell their services to humanity, and humanity, in some ways, humanity is the market provider. Humanity is where everybody goes to do their thing. Humanity is the world's customer, but also the world's producer, in this way. So yeah, that's how. I mean, I had to tie in economics, I had to tie in history and everything else. So there you have it.
And so what kind of lore do you study that you employ
Um,
in your stories?
Ooh, lore. Like, help me out with that. What do you mean by lore exactly?
Like any kind of regional legends that
Okay.
you've had to study with your work.
Well, for this one, I actually had to go into the culture that I am not very familiar with, and I had to study what was ancient Brittany like, and So I actually started looking at what do we have from Brittany, and the thing is, what a lot of today you look at France and you say, well, what language do they speak in France? Well, they speak French, duh. Everybody knows they speak French in France. But there are also other languages. And if you go to Brittany, you will find that they still speak the ancient Celtic language, which is, the word for that language is Brejonic. Yeah, that's what they speak, is Brejonic. Now, just about everybody who speaks Brejonic today also speaks French because they're growing up in France, and of course, French is the official language. But if you go to places like Rennes, uh, which in Brejonic is Roajan, and I'm probably totally mispronouncing that because I haven't studied Brejonic as a language, but it's spelled very much like Roajan. Then and that's the capital of the Kingdom of Brittany in my novel. If you go someplace like that, you're going to find street signs in Brejonic and everything else. So, what were the Brejonic legends? And I started looking at creatures from the Brejonic legends, some of which are related to more well-known languages. Fairies. There's all sorts of fairies, and some of which are not. So that was a lot of fun to dig into those.
And so what do you want your readers to sort of take away from your story? What kind of what do you want to leave them with basically after they put the book down?
Well, I mean, I want to, yeah, I mean, the first thing I really want them to say is, "Wow, that was really cool." I couldn't put it down. It kept me up all night. I can't believe it. Wow, this is just so, it's so much fun to lose myself in this and think about all these ideas of how, humanity and these other races interact and how this works. But I would say that a strong theme of my stuff, even the darkest stuff. And the story of Jahan Dark it's pretty dark, but it's not as dark. It's actually not as dark as the Wishkiller saga. So I mean, I do as dark as it gets. I don't write nihilism. Yeah, I don't write nihilism. I don't write everything was pointless, everything sucked. In the end, there is always a reason to keep going. Yeah. And there is something that gets won. And I remember this, interestingly enough, I remember that uh one of the best books I was ever forced to read, which I was not excited about when I was told to read it because I'd never really heard of it, but I do remember in uh I can't remember his ninth or 10th grade, but we were made to read To Kill a Mockingbird. And at some point, Atticus Finch says to his daughter Scout, like you sometimes you fight even when you know you're absolutely going to lose. And I thought that was foolish at the time. I said no, I mean there's no point in fighting if you're going to lose. And then I read the rest of the book. And I said, but the thing is, Atticus Finch didn't really lose. He lost the case, but he won something more important. He won putting a seed of doubt in these people's mind. He won really making the point that Tom Robinson is innocent. And that's something that I feel my characters do. Yeah, they're always going to win everything they want. No, they're not always going to win everything they want. But are they going to win something that's important? Yeah, they're going to win something that's important. They're fighting for a reason, and the reason is good. So, yeah, I want people to come away with the idea that yes, good is going to be achieved, even
Thank
at
you.
great cost.
And so we've got about eight minutes or so left. Would you mind just talking a little bit about your writing process and your creative process?
but it's a horrible
It's
process.
painful, isn't it?
It's a terrible process. One of the things that one of the problems that has come with actually having some degree of success and the fact that I can get publishers to actually say, yes, we want to put this out, is that people want more books. And I found that I've gotten to the point where writing the first book in a series, that's not very hard. I can write the first book in a series without much trouble. The second book is worse. The third book is even worse than that. And this just comes from I'm still learning to sort of now having every time you write a new book, you sort of add bars to the cage. No, can't say that. I already said the opposite in the previous book. And I mean this is really just part of the learning, but I have more and more gotten into the point where I'll be about halfway through a book and realize, oh crap, I can't go forward. I've got to fix something that was wrong in this particular case. But generally, what I will do is I will write the outline and then I will go back and write sort of what some people would call a very abbreviated first draft. And just I will be filling in the holes in the outline. And then I'll sit down and I'll actually develop that first draft. And so that's the real, some people would call it a second draft. Uh, and others would call it, but it's the first draft that I will actually show it to people and say, this is the thing. And then, of course, there's the rewriting that goes from there. So that's essentially the process. I pretty much agree that I have to be a plotter when I write because if I don't, I'm going to forget what I was doing. And it's not going to make any sense. Now, there have been some books where I just started and then got to a place where I had to say, okay, I've pantsed it through here, and now I have to figure out where this is really going so that I have a roadmap for what it is. I think a lot of the discussions between pantsers and plotters is people using different terms for the same thing. Like I've said to people, like, well, you're plotting. And they say, no, I'm not. I'm a pantser. This is my first draft. It's like, that's not anywhere near first draft. Nobody could read that and make sense of it. Only you could read it. That's an extensive plot. Well, they want to call it a first draft. Okay, it's just, I mean, as many people have said, and I definitely agree with this. The writing process that works is the one that results in a finished book. Yeah. And I don't care what process you have. If it doesn't result in a finished book, it's not a good process. And if it does result in a finished book, then it's a good process. Assuming it results in a finished book that's good, which really means you like it and you can get enough other people to like it that it gets published. Yeah. So there you go.
And so you're married, you've got kids. Is your family kind of like your beta readers?
Well, my wife is a veterinarian and she does not have a lot of time to do any beta reading yet. I'm getting to the point where my kids are old enough to be useful beta readers now, frankly. I mean, my kids are 16, 14, and 12. And all of them have at least read one book that I wrote and liked it. So that's a good thing. Um, but I mean, I don't really have very many beta readers at the moment. I do have a very small writing group that I'm in. And unfortunately, I've been sending them almost nothing because um, the book 3 of the Wish Killer saga, I started sending that to them. They started giving me feedback. And that was about the time I threw up my hands and went, oh, this has got to be fixed. This is spending so much time in the beginning and not nearly enough time in the end, and I think I'm about ready to start throwing things back to them for beta reading finally.
And
Yeah.
what would you say is some of the best feedback, advice, or lesson you've learned over time with your writing?
I've learned that it's very easy for me to get stuck in minutiae because I am the kind of readers that a lot of I'm the kind of reader that a lot of writers hate because I will look at something, I'll be reading, it's like, okay, that totally doesn't make sense. I don't buy it at all. That you're, like your economic system totally doesn't work. Everybody will be okay. Give an example. Anne McCaffrey, okay? And I grew up reading Anne McCaffrey and loving Anne McCaffrey. If there'd been a way for me to snap my fingers and be a dragon rider, I would have done it so fast when I was 12. It's not even funny. Anne McCaffrey's political system is complete and utter BS. I'm sorry. I don't believe for 1 minute that the Dragon Riders don't rule Pern under an iron fist. They just, I mean, nobody's that good and decent. I'm sorry, nobody's that good and decent. If you've got dragons and nobody else has got dragons, you're ruling the world. Yeah, and up until somebody decides to invent gunpowder, at least. You're ruling the world with dragons. I was like, oh no, this fellowship is sworn to protect. We have an oath that we will never use dragon fire against humans. Yeah, you know what? The Knights Templar had an oath too. Yeah, tons of people had oaths. None of them kept them. And so it's really hard for me to go back and read the Dragon Riders of Pern and be serious about it. Unfortunately, I have learned I am in the minority of being that style of reader. So I make my work too hard for myself. I'm really trying to learn like just finish the book, Huggins. Just finish the book. It's okay, man. You can do it.
So we literally have 1 minute left. Is there
Okay.
anything I haven't asked about that you want to mention?
Um, I would really, I mean, I am so excited to be working with Raconteur, and I really hope that anybody who loves this novel will also go back and read, the Responsibility series, will read the Wishkiller saga, and I hope that people who have enjoyed that will come read for through Spyglass Darkly, because I'm super excited about this book. This is the kind of alternate history and reality stuff I've been wanting to do for a long time, and it hasn't gelled until now. So love everything. I love everyone at Raconteur. They've been so wonderful.
Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on this interview. It's been a lot of fun.
You have a great day.
Okay, you too, Lisa.